The fog was so thick, we couldn't see our road across the parking lot. Is this what I've wanted for 5 years? My goal was to set a Guinness World Record for the oldest woman to cycle across Europe. It would be the 6th time I set a record, but this one would be my most ambitious. For one, it would be the longest, longer than I had just flown across the Atlantic Ocean, cycling through 12 foreign countries whose languages I didn't know. For another, I would cycle the first 3,000 miles all the way to Geneva self-supported, meaning I would carry everything I needed on Europa my bike. The farthest I had cycled that way was 1,000 miles. Could I do it for 3,000? I bike-packed. Callan used panniers. I would continue the theme of my rides of the past decade, peace. When I was 20, I lost my older brother in the Vietnam War. His death in a pointless war left a gaping hole in our family. If by cycling for peace, I could prevent even one family from suffering this trauma, it would be worth it. I cycled 14,500 miles in 6 years to superimpose a peace sign over North America. I planned my route through Europe to pass through a site related to peace in each country. The first was at the very start of the ride in this remote spot 450 miles north of the Arctic Circle. Children of the World was the brainchild of a Norwegian writer. He brought 7 children from 7 countries to dream of peace on Earth. Each child made a clay disc to symbolize what peace meant to him or her. Callan and I grabbed our bikes, braced against the wind, and rolled them to the official ride start, the iconic globe of Nordkapp. We couldn't see across the parking lot. The 30-mile-per-hour crosswind pushed me so hard that I stayed in the middle of the road. I relied on hearing to detect if anyone was behind me. Relieved to arrive at our lodging, we spread out all our stuff to dry. And that was day 1. The monster tunnel was on the menu for day 2. This tiny fishing village has been connected to the mainland since 1999 by a very, very long tunnel that goes under the sea. For 5 years, I dreaded this long, dark, steep tunnel. And now I was face to face with it. I coasted downhill for 2 miles to 700 feet below sea level. And then came the payback. 2 miles uphill at a wicked 10% grade. We thought we'd be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but it curved near the end, so we didn't know we'd succeeded until we were nearly out.
Woohoo! Woohoo! You did it!
I was relieved to have that tunnel behind me, and happy to share the road. During the 5 years I prepared for this journey, I read everything I could get my hands on. While some Norwegians would do Hitler's dirty work, others resisted. Odd Nansen was one of them. His organization provided safe haven for Jews fleeing from Nazi-controlled areas of Europe. When the Nazis reached Norway, he was on their radar. He became one of 40,000 Norwegians held in Nazi prisons and concentration camps. He spent 3 months in one near Alta, where we marveled at our long shadows in the midnight sun. During his 3.5 years of imprisonment, he kept a daily diary. He recorded the casual brutality and random terror that characterized camp life. And then he figured out ingenious ways to smuggle out his descriptions. We didn't stay long at this waterfall because another creature liked this space too. We'd expected mosquitoes in Finland, but they found us in Norway. We were prepared for them the next time we stopped. The land Norwegians call home was occupied by Nazi Germany from 1940 to 1945. Callan and I cycled freely in dramatic Norway, independent since then. The first border crossing on a long trip is exhilarating. This was the first of 11. Finland's wildlife kept us company. For 2 weeks, we experienced constant daylight. On the way to our Peace Pearl for Finland, we finally crossed the Arctic Circle and got night back. We had a front row seat to Finland's forestry.
Thinking I don't want to get real close to that while the logs are flying.
Three days past the Arctic Circle, we reached a small town in Finland where our host drove us the short distance to our second Peace Pearl. The Winter War Monument stands in a stone-studded field, each stone representing a soldier lost. 105 brass bells, one for each day of the war, ring softly in the wind, serving as a reminder of the absurdity of war. The invaders set up camp, all lined up on a single road into Finland. Finnish soldiers cut down trees at intervals along this road, so the invaders could neither receive supplies nor proceed forward. The farther south we proceeded in Finland, the more water we encountered. Seagulls were the clue that we were near it. We cycled across narrow land bridges and past World War II cemeteries. We cycled by flowers on the day we reached the 1,000-mile mark. I parked my bike by the side of a bridge to join a crowd of onlookers. Lynn came up behind me and said, "I wouldn't park there if I were you." I grabbed my bike and scooted it forward, barely in time to avoid being dropped into the canal. On our way into Helsinki, we paused at the Peace School. It gave me such hope, but it was a restaurant, and the guy who was setting up tables shooed us away and wouldn't even let us take photographs inside. Maybe the Statue of Peace would give me hope. Finland placed the statue prominently in the harbor in 1968 to express friendship with Russia. As for the monument to world peace installed by Russia, well, that was another story. The Finnish government dismantled it after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Lynn and I cycled freely in calm Finland, free since 1917 and free of invasion since 1940. In the 25 days since our start in Nordkapp, we'd cycled over 1,000 miles, most of them in very remote areas. We had survived tunnels and mosquitoes and had climbed nearly 40,000 feet. I was beginning to think I could do this self-supported thing. A cluster of pearls awaited us across the Baltic Sea. We boarded the ferry from Helsinki in pouring rain. But it cleared as we approached Estonia. The Tallinn TV tower dominated the horizon as we approached. In 1991, on August 20th, a coup d'etat was underway in Moscow. The Estonian government seized the moment and unanimously resolved to restore its independence. When this came to the attention of the Soviets, they ordered troops to Tallinn's TV tower. At the base of the tower, ordinary Estonians blocked the tanks. 4 Estonian men, 2 policemen, and 2 engineers dashed into the elevator and ascended to the control room on the 22nd floor. One of them wedged a matchbook into the elevator door, jamming it and disabling the elevator. By the time the Soviet troops got up the stairs to the control room, the 4 men had locked themselves in. The Soviets demanded that they open the door. The Estonians threatened to activate the fire suppression system. Everyone in the building would die. The bluff worked. The Estonians continued their broadcast. The Soviet troops withdrew. During occupation, Estonians kept their culture alive through song. At the Song Festival grounds overlooking the Baltic Sea, 30,000 people sing to an audience of 100,000. In the 1988 festival, Estonians sang their unofficial national song under the noses of Soviet officials. To restore independence, Estonians sang, jammed elevators with matchbooks, and held hands. The 50th anniversary of the pact made between Stalin and Hitler to divide up Europe was coming up. In the span of just a few weeks, a plan was devised to organize 2 million people across 3 countries to hold hands for 15 minutes. 2 million people, 400 miles, 15 minutes. This jubilant act made the news in the West and brought attention to the plight of the Baltic countries. Kallin's brother had sung in a choir in Estonia during Soviet occupation. He recalled it as drab, and he was under constant surveillance. Kallin and I cycled freely in feisty Estonia, independent since 1991. We'd been cycling for a month and had 1,264 miles in our rearview mirror when we reached Latvia. Kallin and I did a mini Baltic way at the border. The land Latvians call home was occupied by the Soviet Union from 1940 to 1991, the same as Estonia. A storm came out of nowhere. It delayed us and put us at a crossroad at the same time as these 2 gals. Liga and Paula were training for an 80-mile hike in a few months. Liga, I'm fascinated by the Baltic Way. I was there, she said. I have to know more. We have the day off in Riga tomorrow. Can we get together again? It was late when we arrived at our lodging. We were exhausted and hungry. We opted for a short walk around the block. Someone called to us. We didn't know anybody in the city. It was Arnold, who we'd met 700 miles before in Finland. Arnold, a gal named Sarah Cinquini, and I had set out at the same time with the same ambition to cycle from Nordkapp to Tarifa. I had 2 months and thousands of miles to go. Sarah had already arrived in Tarifa. She had completed the entire journey in just 29 days. It would take me 95. For Latvians, the Freedom Monument symbolized independence. For just that reason, the Soviets considered demolishing it while they occupied the country. Riga's Freedom Monument was the midpoint of the Baltic Way. The historic moment was captured by Frank Drauschka, a 19-year-old historian who happened to be visiting Riga from East Berlin. He was participating in a free demonstration for the first time in his life. 2.5 months later, the Berlin Wall came down. We climbed up a church tower to preview our route out of the city the next morning. The truly special moment of the day was meeting up with Liga and her 2 daughters for dinner at a traditional restaurant. I probed Liga's memory about the Baltic Way. For Liga, it was a happy event. Her memories were fuzzy, but she wanted me to know about the barricades. She shared her personal family photos with me. In May 1990, the Latvian parliament voted to restore independence. The Soviets were determined to get the Latvians in line. They sent tanks toward downtown Riga. Ordinary Latvians brought whatever they could to make access to the city difficult. Liga's father sat with others around bonfires day and night, prepared to defend the city with their bare hands if necessary. Liga's mother, on the right, took tea and food to those guarding the streets. The Latvian press was prepared to broadcast any violence perpetrated by the Soviets, who were still concerned about how that would look to the world. The Soviets backed off 2 weeks later. Paula told us about a tall monument that used to stand on the far side of the river. We'd be cycling right by it. Its official name was the Victory Memorial to the Soviet Army. Locally, they called it Moscow's Finger. For 37 years, Latvians despised the monument, but tolerated it so as not to poke the bear. Russia's invasion of Ukraine changed that attitude. The Latvian government demolished it in August 2022 and replaced it with a peaceful park. Lynn and I cycled freely in vibrant Latvia, independent since 1991. The land Lithuanians call home was occupied by the Soviet Union from 1940 to 1991, just like the other Baltic states. This was country number 5 for us. Here was the Hill of Crosses. From a distance, it looks drab, but close up, it caught me. For a few hundred years, Lithuanians have come here to find peace or hope. During their 50 years of occupation, the Soviets tried to wipe out religion. Tanks bulldozed the hill several times. Each morning afterwards, new crosses sprouted, placed by brave people who snuck through barricades at great risk. It was a quiet, meditative place. Visitors exchanged only quiet murmurs. So it was shocking when military jets roared overhead, a vivid reminder of how close we were to Russia and how vulnerable Lithuania and the other Baltic states are. This castle in Lithuania is the first one that we visited inside, complete with an impressive kitchen, cooking herbs, a dungeon, and the required tower. There were many more castles on the path ahead. No matter how charming, a castle is an outdated mode of protecting one's pixel on Earth. They've been replaced with mobile militaries that protect national borders. Will the day come when national militaries, like castles, become obsolete? The tanks were training about 25 miles from Kaliningrad, a piece of Russia detached from the mainland. Our route took us to a Lithuanian town right on the border with Kaliningrad, where we touched Russia. This is what not being free looks like. During the 50 years of Soviet occupation, Lithuania lost 1 million people, a third of its population, to forced deportations, murders, and executions of political opponents. Lynn and I were lucky to cycle freely in quirky Lithuania, independent since 1991. The Baltics are dwarfed by Russia, and yet the tiny countries succeeded in standing up for themselves. Will they remain free? In 40 days, we cycled 1,649 miles through 5 countries. For 123 years, Poland was not recognized as a country and had vanished from world maps. Later, during the World War II years, Poland was occupied by Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. We reached our first town in Poland as Sunday Mass was wrapping up. The priest was blessing cars with holy water, so we got in line with our bikes. A new talisman joined our collection. On our way into Torun, we encountered walkers on a 12-day pilgrimage to Yasna Gora, a religious site. Torun is proud of her native son, Copernicus. He altered our perspective of the place of the Earth in the universe. The inscription on his statue: "He moved the Earth and stopped the sun." Now, 500 years later, we understand that perspective so much better. Earth is but a speck in the universe. There's no other place like it that we know of, no other place surely capable of supporting life that we know of. Rather than wasting resources on fighting each other, it might be a good idea to use them to protect the Earth. It's the only home that we all have. Cardinal Wyszynski led Poland's resistance to communism in the 1980s. In fact, he spent 3 years in prison for his activism. Torun's Church of the Holy Spirit was the hotbed of resistance. I had a bad feeling when our destination town was crossed out on the road sign. It would have been a long detour, but on bikes we were able to get through. It was worth it. It got us to this former sugar beet factory, one of our favorite lodgings on the entire trip, home to the longest indoor slide in the world. They served up a vast breakfast buffet. These were the breakfast desserts. The transformation of this factory into a whimsical lodging exemplified the ingenuity and creativity we experienced throughout Poland. Breakfast fortified us to reach mile 2000 of our journey. It occurred by a stubbly field. Just a little farther ahead, Kalin found this bus shelter, a more suitable place to celebrate our 2,000-mile mark. A family played on the adjacent playground, and that's where we found a pearl we had not planned. The dad saw we were taking selfies, and in perfect English, he offered to take pictures of us. "You never know who you're going to meet when you go to take out the trash," he said. While we snacked, Kalin noticed that the guy turned around. Back at the bus stop, he asked, "Would you like to come to our house and have vegetables from our garden?" We had 30 miles to go. I saw Kalin hesitate, and I said, "Sure." And so we had an impromptu lunch with Iga, Olek, and their adorable son. Fortified by our celebratory surprise lunch, we made it to Poznan. I was curious about the name of our lodging. Google Translate clarified. It meant Royal Castle. As a bed and breakfast, it was a little diminished from its former glory. In our final town in Poland, we ate in good company, just not at the same time. Napoleon once ate here. Kalin and I cycled freely through energetic Poland, independent since 1945. In 51 days, Kalin and I had cycled through 6 countries. I was now halfway to Tarifa. Over 2,000 miles into this trip, we were averse to unpaved roads. At the top of a hill, our route showed one to the left. I opted to continue straight for a bit, and then I checked my map. This time, the workaround to avoid the unpaved road was many miles, so we gave it a try. It was worth it. It led to a wild downhill where I squeezed my brakes hard to stop and marvel at the castle ahead. On a high meadow, it felt like my nose was in a honey jar. Roiling fish hinted at what lay ahead. The land Czechs call home was occupied by Nazi Germany from 1938 to 1945. So I'm pushing the bike up a 12% hill that we need to do to get to the Peace Garden. We hope it's actually there. We didn't know what we were looking for. It could be a square yard with a wilted flower in it. We topped the hill, and Kalin spotted a large expanse ahead. One day, children came home from school and played with the geese in the local pond of this little town. The man Hitler appointed to oversee the Czech territory was ambushed by paratroopers of the Czech resistance. This village was suspected of harboring resistors and aiding the paratroopers. Hitler took revenge on it. He ordered the annihilation of the entire village. Through poignant photos, articles of children's clothing, and documents, The museum brings to life the sweet village before the massacre. Recorded interviews with survivors provide vivid detail of the massacre itself. The story of this village occupies one paragraph in a 412-page book about World War II. How many peace gardens will we have to build before humans stop brutality toward one another? We made it into Germany, but we still had 13 miles and a lot of climbing to get to our destination. I wonder what this X is about. Dang, a wrong turn.
Ugh. There's another Christmas tree pole.
One more climb. We can do it. We made it to the top of the final hill. We thought we had a half-mile to go all downhill. But two bad things happened. There was no road. And after 2,400 miles, we had our first flat. We had to walk our bikes down a steep, rocky path in the woods. That last half-mile turned into 2 and took well over an hour. For the first time, I almost ran out of water. When we got to our lodging, I drank 5 glasses while Kellen fixed her flat. The next morning, it was flat again. She fixed it the second time. And then, with 10 miles to go, to a place we believed there was a bike shop, she had her third flat. Again, she fixed it. But there were no more supplies to fix it a fourth time. Anxious thoughts rattled our minds during those 10 miles. We made it to the bike shop. There was a big festival in town, and all the bike mechanics were busy. But they fit her in. We cycled past tall fields of hops on our route through southeastern Germany known as Bavaria. But I didn't know the role of hops or Bavaria in Hitler's story. In 1923, Hitler attempted a coup in this beer hall. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but he served only 6 months in a jail in Landsberg, a town on this beautiful river. That was long enough for him to write Mein Kampf. Within 10 years, he got himself elected in a democratic system, and then in just 53 days, he dismantled democracy. Frenzied supporters flocked to rallies on this spot in Munich. Within months, Hitler opened a concentration camp in nearby Dachau. He spread concentration and extermination camps throughout Europe. Munich's Angel of Peace stood nearby while Hitler committed his carnage. Kellen noted that the angel didn't do much good. Still, I'd rather have a symbol of the aspiration. Not everyone got caught up in Hitler's vision. Some walked through a back alley to avoid giving the mandatory Hitler salute. Eventually, through World War II, Hitler was defeated. The difference a day makes. The photo on the left shows bodies found at Dachau's crematorium the day before liberation. On the right, jubilant prisoners celebrate their freedom. The next day, Hitler committed suicide. Germany surrendered unconditionally a few days later. Going to Dachau, I fell. Leaving Dachau, my left clip broke with a big hill looming right in front of me. 2 weeks before, my right clip had broken. My right ankle was cranky from 700 miles of cycling without the stabilization provided by the clip. I didn't know if I could do the climbs without any clips at all, but I did the best I could with what I had. We stopped to snack in the shadow of this magnificent building. A week in the Alps was ahead of me, and there was no prospect of replacing my cleats. But my dilemma was trivial compared to that of 5,000 people who passed through the doors of this arch-abbey beginning in 1945. They were survivors, liberated from concentration camps, many from nearby Dachau. Here they took their first steps toward healing.
They're friendly.
The town of Ursi was a healing stop. Each Bavarian town had its unique maypole, a symbol of spring and life. We wouldn't see them for much longer. We wrapped up our time in Germany with an 18% descent. We could see this castle from the top.
Entering Austria.
It was nearly dark when we crossed into Switzerland. I didn't see the border crossing. Our total time in Austria was about 2.5 hours, much of it spent in an unsuccessful attempt to find a lodging. We had cycled for 2 months and were now in our 10th country. About 8 p.m., we gratefully rolled into a lodging in St. Margrethen, Switzerland. We rested and watched it rain from our window. On our way to Zurich, we enjoyed a lovely stretch along Lake Constance. Navigating through busy Zurich's maze of construction, rails, people, river, and hills, we finally made it to our destination. Right near a bike shop, but they didn't carry my cleats. From Zurich, Kalin had found a multimodal tour that took us way up in the Alps to Jungfraujoch. Earth still has some glaciers, and what an opportunity to see one up close. Kalin thought, Switzerland's a nice place to be a cow. It's also a nice place to cycle downhill. It's a nice place to cycle, period. The day was glorious and going so well. And then an unpaved stretch got worse. We spotted what looked like an exit off to the left, but we didn't know it was straight uphill and rocky. We scraped pounds of mud off our bikes and then rerouted. Kalin insisted that we avoid anything that looked unpaved. Our modified route added more than 8 miles to our ride and skipped the town that had the chocolate shop I was looking forward to. We turned a corner, and there was Lake Geneva below us. That meant that the self-supported time with Kalin was coming to a close, and soon I'd meet the team that would accompany me to the end in Tarifa. The downhill through the vineyards was extremely steep. My brakes hadn't been checked since I left home. I was so concerned about the steep descent that I didn't notice Mont Blanc right in front of us. Survived the descent. We caught our breath at this castle on the lake. Most of the way to the team transition in Geneva was pretty tranquil, but it had its moments. And then we were 5. Boomer, Mary, and Beth were there to get me the rest of the way to Tarifa. Making it to Geneva in one piece felt like a big deal. No drama, Kalin had just enough visa days left to accompany us to the border of France. I had ridden my bike to the site in San Francisco, where the United Nations was conceived, and to the headquarters in New York. And now I'd made it to the headquarters in Geneva. Jump back to 1859. Italy is struggling ferociously for her independence. A battle rages in the city of Solferino in northern Italy. Henry Dunant, on a business trip, finds himself in the thick of it. He's horrified by the sight of thousands of soldiers of several nationalities strewn across the battlefield. On the spot, he organizes the local population to provide care and relief for the soldiers. 3 years later, he wrote a small book about it. Most of the book is a description of the horrors he saw. In the final pages, he describes an idea for a politically neutral organization dedicated to providing impartial care to battlefield wounded. To that end, he co-founded the International Red Cross. By 1864, it had initiated the Geneva Conventions, still in effect today. In 1901, he shared the first Nobel Peace Prize and then died in poverty a decade later. We looked calm, but preparing for imminent departure was on our minds. An important item arrived with the Geneva to Tarifa team. To ease my mind about traveling self-supported, I had sent ahead of myself a package of spare parts that were too heavy to carry on my bike, but the plan went awry. My package traveled nearly 15,000 miles before it reached me. The most important item? New cleats for my shoes. And Boomer had the expertise and the patience to install them. Without cleats to attach my shoes to my pedals, I had cycled 370 miles, crossed Switzerland's Alps, and climbed the equivalent of halfway up Mount Everest. I was giddy with relief. On a perfect morning, we were all packed and ready to go, unbridled enthusiasm with a ripple of trepidation. I reveled, riding through a stunning landscape with shoes that worked. It was only 12 miles to France. In the exhilaration of the moment, Mary and Boomer cycled right past the border. I had to call them to come back so we could take the picture with everyone and say goodbye to Kalin. In 67 days, Kalin and I rode 2,926 miles through 10 countries and climbed 93,757 feet. Through the last 2 countries, the plan was for Beth to support Boomer, Mary, and me as we cycled, but it didn't work out that way. Neither Boomer nor I heard or saw Mary go down. We enjoyed the thrilling descent down this hill, but when we got to the bottom, Mary wasn't behind us. We made a quick strategic decision. I would continue forward, and Boomer would go back up the hill and look for Mary. He found her in the care of 3 emergency medical technicians. I didn't know what happened or how serious it was until much later. At this beautiful spot, I was really worried about Mary. At this dam, I got word that she was in the hospital. The Via Rona bicycle trail was magnificent, but it wasn't the same without Boomer or Mary with me. It wasn't until I got to the day's destination that I learned that Mary's injuries were severe enough that she was going to have to fly home. A devastating end to a summer of training. In an instant, I lost 2 co-riders, one fully planned, the other utterly unplanned. Beth, Boomer, and I continued on the beautiful Via Rona the next morning. On the way to Vienne, France, I reached the 3,000th mile of the trip. As I cycled out of Vienne, I was still adjusting to the reality that Mary wasn't going to be with us for the rest of the trip. The ride from Vienne to the Peace Pearl that I chose for France was the hardest of all 95 days of the trip. We cycled 62 miles and climbed over 5,000 feet to the plateau where 5,000 Christians saved 5,000 Jews during the occupation of France by Nazi Germany. We enjoyed thrilling descents, and then we'd have to go up again. During Nazi occupation, policemen smoked on this terrace adjacent to the house where 20 Jewish children were hidden. This was Tante Soli, our lodging in Le Chambon-sur-Lignon. Our hosts, Veronique and Renaud, didn't know the story of the house when they bought it, but they embraced it fully when they found out. Tante Soli and other residents of this plateau resisted by hiding thousands of Jews. A museum in town tells their story. 10 miles after we left Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, I reached the highest elevation of my trip, 3,672 feet. This narrow, steep bridge caught me by surprise. Maybe I was thinking about finally swimming in the Mediterranean Sea. I bungled my shifting. I lost momentum and balance. Fortunately, I caught myself. Well, Europa's fork and my right knee did. The location was seared into my flesh. Surprisingly, the warm salt water soothed my fresh wound. Or maybe it was my soul that was soothed for the moment. Rain was forecast for our upcoming pass through the Pyrenees. Now I'd be doing it with rain and 2 wounds. The monument above me, where I scraped my knee? It was a memorial to Pierre Brossolette, a French resistance fighter. In 1942, he'd embarked from this spot on a mission to Great Britain. A year and a half later, he was caught by the Gestapo on another mission. He knew too much. Rather than taking the risk of divulging information during torture, he jumped out of a 6th-floor window to his death. It was pushing 8 p.m. when we got to the bridge in Le Balou, where Sophie and her family celebrated the arrival of the storks on their migration from the north. Maybe they were the same storks that had kept us company in the Baltics. Le Balou was just 10 miles from the top of the pass into Spain. If only the rain would hold off. I'd been cycling for 77 days through 11 European countries, less than 1,000 miles to go. I was anxious to tackle the pass. It wasn't raining yet. The gravel we'd endured in southern France had devoured Boomer's tires, and he needed new ones. I headed out while he searched for them. I jettisoned my prepared route when I saw this sign. Now I was on a scavenger hunt for the signs, instead of keeping my nose glued onto the route on my bike computer that would have shown me when I reached the top of the pass. When I started descending, I couldn't tell if it was temporary or if I had reached the top of the pass. But 10 miles into the ride, I had 1,217 feet above sea level. I've cycled over summits higher than 10,000 feet. I don't know why I was so petrified of this baby one in the Pyrenees. It was the descent I should have worried about. 100 feet per mile is considered steep. I descended 600 feet in the first mile after the summit. Beth met me at the border to celebrate my gleeful entry into the final country of the trip. The rain I had feared on the pass? It came, but just a drizzle, accompanied by a tailwind that gently pushed me toward my destination, the birthplace of Salvador Dali. I had some things to dry out once I got in the lodging. Spain does dinner at 8. That took some getting used to, as did seafood being considered vegetarian. An unexpected morning downpour foiled our intention to get into Barcelona nice and early. I was eager to get to the city of Antonio Gaudi's architecture that I'd visited as an art student 50 years before. We dodged puddles and pedestrians getting out of town. The pathway along the coast was beautiful, but it had its challenges.
We are in a hike-to-bike cyclocross situation.
Oh shoot.
I think that's the route.
Yeah, this is really tough.
And there was Barcelona. A well-hidden ramp took us up to an unexpected memorial. Spain has only been a free country since 1975. The wall names 1,706 people who were executed by the firing squads of Spain's last dictator, Francisco Franco. When I was not welcomed at the cathedral for lack of proper attire, I elected to search for my Peace Pearl for Spain. The Barcelona Institute of Peace has been on my radar for over 5 years. Yet I found nothing at the address I had for it. No sign, nothing written on a doorbell. Like Peace School in Helsinki, it seems that the Barcelona Institute of Peace is just a website. Disappointed, I checked my map again. It showed me the ultimate surprise, John Lennon Square right around the corner. And lots of local residents living the message. After the Barcelona Institute of Peace, there were no more Peace Pearls to look forward to. The end goal of Tarifa was the motivator now, and that was 2 weeks and 750 miles away. While Beth and Boomer ate breakfast, I tackled a whopper of a coastal climb. I try not to procrastinate when something difficult is in front of me. The sky looked ominous, and then it broke open just before we reached the top of a climb. Someone thoughtfully put in place a bus shelter for us. We were there for an hour while it poured. Our fingers went numb from the cold. A deluge before we went into Barcelona, and another one after we left. I plummeted down a steep descent and kept my feet up to avoid the puddles that had collected in a culvert at the bottom. To continue southward, we had to go back up a different way. Boomer stairmastered it. I walked. I will forever associate this sunset with the leftover burrito that exploded in our laundry bag. Boomer took exquisite care of our bikes. His knee was acting up, so he opted to hitch a ride in the van with Beth. What looked like an impossible climb on the route turned out to be a tunnel, a refreshing respite from the heat. Beth and Boomer arrived at our destination hotel before me. They were repulsed by human feces on the wall. When you make 100 reservations ahead of time, you're going to have a disappointment or two. Could I keep going? Of course, I love being ahead of schedule. Proceeding southward from Valencia, we crossed dozens of thirsty riverbeds. As dry as it was, crops grew. I goofed up my math and celebrated my 4,000-mile mark too soon. As a math person, I was mortified when I realized my mistake. The city was abuzz, but we didn't know why. As I made my way to the table that Boomer had found for dinner, there were loud booms and smoke and lots of sirens, yet nobody seemed concerned. The lights in the plaza went dark, and there was a hush. An ancient conflict between Moors and Christians was enacted. If I had tried to plan this, it wouldn't have worked out. The routes were becoming more difficult. It took time and energy to get around roadblocks. One route plopped us in a dry reservoir. We searched for an exit, but there wasn't one. The road we had seen on the map was abandoned. We had to backtrack and ride on the highway with the trucks. Then a local cyclist advised Boomer against our plan to go inland. He urged us to follow the coast. Now what? Suddenly, I had to trash my plan, and I had no alternative. I feared the trip was over, failed, a week before the finish, after 5 years of planning and anticipation. But I don't give up easily. About 10 p.m., after a hot, exhausting day of cycling, we figured out a way back to the coast. What if it didn't work? Before we hit the glitches, I reached my real 4,000-mile mark. We reached Tabernas with its castle in a high desert. In the morning, we swooped down from the high desert. We made it back to the coast. We cycled past an entire peninsula of water-sucking greenhouses. In spite of all the mishaps, I could feel the end nearing. I thought the kilometer markers indicated how far it was to Tarifa. We were on countdown. We were closer than we realized. Tarifa was at about kilometer 100, about 120 miles away. We celebrated prematurely. We had no idea how hard the last few days would be. I was starting to think about writing in my blog that I'd made it across Europe without a flat. At least it happened after I was done cycling for the day. Boomer and I fixed it in the morning. Sometime in the future, I may look back on this day and think it was funny, but now I still feel rattled by it. In spite of the giant bull statue looming over me, the first 24 miles were dreamy. Then we hit congested Malaga. We got off the highway, but then we had to navigate the neighborhood and then figure out how to get back out.
We might get into a dead end from which we can't go up.
At 6 p.m., we had to make a major decision: stop here or press forward. 3 weeks earlier, we'd succeeded at a 24-mile dash in France starting at this hour. We both thought we could do it again, and we were highly motivated to try, because if we succeeded, we could get to Tarifa a whole day early. Beth texted that the lodging was not at the end of the route. It was more than 7 miles past that. By the time night fell 3 hours later, we had eked out only 13 more miles. We were far from the lodging with neither light nor a route to get there. I took my required endpoint selfie. A pair of four-legged visitors like the Kasbah too. Yeah, wild boars in a congested city. I jumped up on a wall. Beth kindly came to fetch us with the van. I was shocked at how close I was to the finish, but I still had to get myself from the Kasbah back to this lodging. It was a straight shot in the van on the A7, but by bike? I was so worried I couldn't fall asleep. It must have been 3 a.m. before I drifted off. When I awoke, I remembered my original route. Boomer and I looked it over to refine it. While I cycled it, Boomer would clarify the route to the finish. Beth drove me back to the Kasbah and chalked a birthday greeting for me on the sidewalk. It was also the International Day of Peace. It took contortions to stay off the big highway. In fact, I crossed over or under it 10 times in the first 10 miles. And then I was back. Boomer's route to the finish was 70 miles long, with 4,000 feet of climbing. but it was something we knew we could do. Beth and Boomer treated me to birthday dinner. I was so exhausted that Boomer was up and out before me, but his navigation device failed. I stuck to my route. I hit a rocky patch and roadblocks, spotted the Rock of Gibraltar, and even rode on the big highway we had so diligently avoided until the final day. I crossed under an aqueduct and came to the final rest stop of the entire 3-month voyage. We gave ourselves a pep talk for the climbs that would start as soon as we turned right and southward toward Tarifa. I'm wrapping up 140,000 feet of climbing, 14,000 of it in the Alps without clips. And there it was, the summit of the final climb. It was literally all downhill from here. Tarifa!
There she is. She's arriving. You did it.
Beth captured the moment I knew I had made it. From the gusts of the Arctic to the windy Strait of Gibraltar, I had crossed Europe. I had cycled from the solstice to the equinox. The Mediterranean Sea was on my left, the Atlantic Ocean on my right. "95 days, 4,330 miles, 140,000 feet of climbing, 12 free countries, a dozen shimmery pearls to inspire humans toward a more peaceful future, and 1 Guinness World Record." It was time to rest. Castles protected a smidge of land. Militaries protect our national borders. What will we develop to protect our pixel in the universe, our common home?